Start streaming. Okay, we're live. We're live today with Justin Vacula, and he's with Stoic Solutions. And I'm going to send out a Twitter announcement.
All right, thanks for having me today.
And a Facebook announcement.
Can you hear me? Am I coming through?
Yes, you're coming through.
All right, very good, very good. Yep, thanks for having me today.
So we're going to talk about tolerance in the modern age. And let me get this, I'm getting this set up.
Right, and on that note, I released a new podcast episode today. It was with a former professor of mine, still is a philosophy professor at King's College in Wilkes-Barre University. We talked about Stoicism and Christianity, finding some overlap there, and me coming from a perspective of being an atheist, having many different perspectives than him. We were able to talk and have some productive discussion, talk about some disagreement, and learn from the discussion, which I hope will be productive and valuable to others as well.
That's great. And you said you just had it, or you've released it?
Yep, released it earlier today. Dr. Regan Lance Reitzma.
That's great. So let me check a few more settings here. Okay, so we're talking about tolerance in the modern age. And right now there's this whole, what's really current is the issue on the left is intolerance towards people that they disagree with, severely disagree with, or just disagree with. And then you have people on the right or the center asking for civility.
Right, and I would think something that goes all kinds of ways, right? People in all different political camps or ideas just being very intolerant, not being charitable of others' perspectives. And, well, you disagree, you must hate America. Well, you disagree, you must be a racist, you must be a Nazi. So people jump to these wide conclusions, no matter the perspective, it seems.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's on both sides. But what's interesting is that right now it seems to be tilted towards the intolerance on the left, with accusations of everyone's a far right, alt right, fascist. So let's have a discussion. We can have a discussion. Why? Because So I mean,
it must be terrible because X, I suppose.
Yeah.
Coming from a Stoic perspective, there's a lot of talk of hearing out what other people have to say, realizing that there might be truth in all sorts of schools, all sorts of different perspectives. And while we might disagree, we can talk about that and see where people are coming from, why they hold the ideas that we do. And just remember that everyone is human. People have different areas of life, different specialties. They come from different, maybe as we would say today, classes, different backgrounds, upbringings, countries, all of these different characteristics. And let's not put people into a box and say, oh, just because you have this one quality about you, it must mean that you believe X, you believe Y, you don't believe Z, right? Let's try to get a civil conversation and what's happening.
Right. And the way I see it right now, there's this tolerance of intolerance. On the one hand, I do get the concept of not tolerating people you've branded as fascists, etc. Rather than having a debate with people you're opposed to, they move right to violence. But at what point are we to consider these people with an apparent righteous cause as the intolerant that we shouldn't tolerate? Meaning,
right,
it's come full circle. We people that we shouldn't respect the beliefs of people that are X, Y, and Z. These types of people, these horrible people. So therefore, we have to be intolerant of them. And since words equal violence, and violence is the only remedy to violence, at what point do we now say we cannot? It's a kind of like a circle, a vicious circle, right, Justin?
Right. And it will just end in destruction, right? Years ago, there was some talk in the atheist community, science communities, regarding creationism on campuses, universities, schools. And the idea was, well, we think these people are very obviously wrong about what they're doing, so let's respond with information. Let's bring our books. Let's have our lectures. Let's talk about why they're wrong, not try to hurt them, not even try to ban them, but rather present the information, have the discussion. In some cases, you might say, well, this person's view is just so drastically wrong, or this person's really repugnant, so it's not worth engaging them directly in conversation. But there can be some remedies to that, like presenting an opposite case, like saying why you come from the position you do, but pulling fire alarms or deplatforming or having some underhanded tactics. I've seen speakers that were intending to go to universities unable to do so unless they paid a sort of security fee. This heckler's veto, I've heard it referred to. I don't think this is the way to have conversation in a civilized society. Let the speaker in, let the speaker say what they have, as long as they're not advocating for violence or really off the deep end of just hurling invective and names at people. It can be hard to draw that line. And that's the problem, that if people in one political camp or ideological camp say, well, this is the line, this is hate speech, and you have such a nebulous term, well, what happens when someone from another political camp happens to be in power? They lament Donald Trump, for instance. Well, if he can have a great deal of authority and say, well, we don't want this person with this political perspective speaking, or this ideological bent, that could be a problem. They might find themselves banned in the future.
That's what Deconverted Man is saying in the chat. He's saying that the tactics you use will be used against you. Hate is met with more hate. Martin Luther King Jr. had it right. Meet hate with love. And then he also says, if you do not debate someone, perhaps it is your stance. Your stance is so weak that you have no argument.
Right. That can be a thing for sure. Although I've been hearing this thing of, well, we don't want to educate you. It's not our role to do that. You're just wrong. Just Google it. You'll find out, right? This seems to be like very lazy ways of thinking. We're not going to engage in every conversation everywhere. I can be in endless comment threads on Facebook, on Twitter, wherever else, people critical of my work, people just critical of others' perspectives. And, well, maybe those comment sections aren't the greatest use of my time, and I could put out information in another way, maybe just authoring a podcast episode, writing a blog post, just having something on my own page. So I wouldn't say we have to engage with all the arguments, but if you're going to be so vociferous and say, oh, well, this person should be banned, this event shouldn't happen on campus, then why not respond in a different way? If you're going to choose your time, choose that battle.
Deconverted Man. They do not seem to think about the consequences of the action taken. No, you have not met the burden of proof when you do that. Like this nitwit wouldn't post a link to what he was talking about. Google it. Nope. You post what you claimed. I'm not going to research it for you. The person make the claim has the burden of proof. This is we were talking before we went live about an echo chamber.
Mm-hmm.
And see, we all know, all of us as a group, as a tribe, know what the truth is. And you're an outsider. You're challenging us. We can't be bothered. We can't be bothered to, educate you, to take the time to show you what we've found as the truth.
Right, a dangerous position to be in.
And don't forget the hate machine too.
Right. We can't make progress if we think that, oh, well, we already have all the answers. There's nothing to be gained from this other person, from this other perspective. And actually engaging with the arguments can make us better, right? We can better understand the positions we hold. And we might come to find out that the positions we hold aren't so good if we hear arguments from an opposing side. I mean, many people I know in the atheist skeptic communities, they were raised in religious traditions. And later they came to question that. Well, what was the method that they questioned it? They heard from atheists. They heard people putting out some arguments that seemed to be reasonable, and they weren't saying, oh, you need to be shut down. They weren't threatening violence or anything. It doesn't be an effective way to persuade or really engage an audience with discussion. If we could be more constructive and actually put the arguments out there and have discussion rather than hurling names at people and being nasty, this seems to be a better way to go forward. We're in a society where there are, again, all kinds of people holding different values, people of different backgrounds. And how can we get along and work together if we're not going to even have conversations? We're just going to try to shut conversations down and brand people that disagree with us as
right,
racist,
tolerance,
misogynist, whatever.
Tolerance is the ability to live with people you don't agree with. Putting it really simply, people who tolerate people they only agree with or like aren't actually tolerant.
Mm-hmm. Or at least it's extremely selective. And yeah, you're just putting that echo chamber and you're not seeming to make any progress. If you're just satisfied with what you have now, what room is there for growth? We can look back throughout our lives and think, well, I've changed this perspective, I've changed that, I've been exposed to this idea, I've changed directions here, I've had different priorities. And it's a good thing to expose ourselves to a lot of information, even if just knowing how to refute the arguments that our opponents, our ideological opponents, so to say, might put forth, rather than just making the straw man and just really not giving them the time of day and really looking at their arguments seriously.
Let's see. Well, somebody's making arguments in the comments. That is a bad idea. So the response to a thing said, done that two-party group does not like is now responded with unfriend, unfollow, block, etc. That is hate, not understanding, not logic. Calling you a poop head cannot forward my argument in any lasting way. It will end in nothing but chaos. We must be able to disagree with each other without this rage machine trap. Is someone on an air machine over there?
Oh,
I hear air sounds.
I think that's some noise in your background, maybe.
I hear air sounds. I think, let me turn my microphone down because I think I think that's my PC. It's going ree.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, you gotta make your home sound studio with the egg crate and the acoustic foam. That's the way forward.
Yeah, it's never done that before. It's like when it's doing like massive video processing. How's that? Can you still hear sounds? Your argument makes me feel bad. Thus, it's irrelevant. Time to deplatform. Rah. Yeah. Well, feelings. Now that's we get into feelings, right?
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing from the Stoics. They're saying, okay, well, we're to question those thoughts, those feelings that we have surrounding certain events or certain words that, well, it's really our interpretation, it's our perception of things that makes it so. That if someone happens to present a perspective and we just happen to feel offended, well, we're to question, is it right here to be offended? What good is that really going to do? And it's really us taking offense to something, not a person forcing us to feel or think a certain way, or to take some personal responsibility, rather than saying, oh, that person made me mad, that person made me angry. It's maybe you could feel that way and rephrase and say, I felt X when this was said or that was said. And we're really to question, okay, well, we're in the world and there are going to be all sorts of things that people will say. There will be all sorts of behaviors. We're not going to be immune from that, right? Even simple instances of road rage, people are going to get upset. We really can't avoid many of these things in life. So the question is, how are we going to deal with this? It doesn't mean their behavior is acceptable, but we can not get so angry ourselves. Is anger really going to help? It's just probably going to harm ourselves, as we're going to be angry. We're going to engage in some self-destructive behaviors and really lament the state of the world. And that's not a good position to go in.
Right, kind of like a downward spiral. One thing that has always rubbed me the wrong way is the word tolerance. And it's like, it's a gut thing. It's, I will tolerate you sounds kind of like condescending. and but in reality, it means um, tolerance of other people's opinions
Yeah.
and things.
Yeah. It doesn't mean embracing it or saying
Right.
that it's right, but rather maybe
Well, no.
there's a
The thing
certain
is,
difference.
tolerance to tolerate always struck me as something that was kind of condescending. We'll tolerate your attendance here, but we won't have to like it. And
Hmm.
so I
Right.
I always felt that in the quote unquote tolerance movement that several years ago in the secular movement, I would always like, why are you pushing for tolerance? Why not acceptance? Why not mutual respect? Why not, people more understanding? But it is a default point, and it isn't an insult, and it isn't condescending. To me, it always felt that way. You'll be tolerated while you're here.
Hmm. Right. So maybe not the best word choice there, but if we're happen to, maybe this comes up in the realm of coworkers. Oh, well, the people we work with, we might not really like them so much, but oh, well, Jeff is over there in the warehouse and he's doing his job and we don't really get along, but we have to work together and finish this project, or we're on the same assembly line. So okay, I'm not going to get in his face. I'm just going to kind of ignore him throughout the day. I'm just going to tolerate him, right? There seem to be different levels of how enthusiastic we are in regards to other people, and maybe tolerate would be one of those lower levels.
Right. And here's something that I was reading about recently, and the concept that all views have equal merit and none should
Oh,
be considered better than another.
oh, that's interesting because that seems to be a self-refuting thing, right? Well, does that view have equal merits? Is that view no better than another view?
But the issue that it's tied with tolerance, and so if we're to be tolerant, and how can you be tolerant of someone if all views are equals?
Yeah.
Because the meaning of toleration is treating people we disagree with respect. So if you're being intolerant towards others just by disagreeing, this defies the notion of tolerance.
Right. So there's a paradox, it seems there, that, well, if we're going to tolerate, say, a person who's engaging in murdering children, we're just going to do nothing about it, then are we being intolerant because we're not protecting those children? Right. We have laws in place in society. We don't like that kind of behavior. We see it as destructive to society. So no, we don't tolerate that. There will be certain things that we don't tolerate, and we have really good reasons to do so. Okay, well, we're going to remove them from society. We'll try to rehabilitate them, or if that doesn't work, then we're just going to set them off from other people. Maybe this person can't be helped in some way. It's just some very serious disorder the person has. So we're not going to tolerate all perspectives, and I don't think anyone's going to take that position. Maybe they're just being more figurative. They're not really meaning what they're saying there. They're maybe just saying, well, we should be tolerant of many views rather than all.
Well, I think I think all views are equal is like saying all cultures are equal.
Mm.
So they're not equal. They're not the same.
Right.
And in Europe and North America, we have rights, we have freedoms and rights that are not practiced in other parts of the world, and so those are cultural. It's not skin color, it's not religion. It's well, some parts of the world it is because it's merged in with the culture.
Hmm.
But so that's the genesis of that. I think is that all points of view, all positions are equal, all cultures are equal, all points of view are all positions are equal. So and I think we can agree that the the state of democracy in the West is not equal to the state of that it was, say, 800 years ago.
Right. And do the people in North Korea have such freedoms that we have,
Exactly.
right? Those are some easier examples. So perhaps they're meaning that, oh, well, you're trying, maybe it's some sort of rebuke of nationalism. And they're saying, well, we don't want to say, oh, this country is the best country, or all the other countries are terrible, right? Maybe it's just some extreme reaction there. Again, what are they really trying to say when they say that? See, I'm trying to be charitable here and try to get a better perspective rather than just being intolerant, as you might say, and thinking, oh, these people are ridiculous. We don't even need to hear what they have to say, right? It's a phrase I've heard before called steel manning, trying to make their position the strongest they can. But sometimes, yes, that could be a really bad position. They get into this relativistic mindset of, well, there really are no values. Everything is just subjective, right? This goes into postmodernism in some way too, and that there really are no facts, right? They'll try to deny that.
There's no truths. There's nothing.
Right.
Right. Well, and then we have the recently, because this is the title of this discussion is in the modern age, but how about like very recently, last several weeks, month or so, is people, Democrats, liberals, saying to not be respectful when they see Republicans, or they see certain people in Donald Trump's cabinet in public. So they are, feelings are not facts, are marching forward as the way to do things, sadly.
Yeah, and even some people who might consider themselves classical liberals or on the left, they're not really a fan of Trump, but they see the actions that are coming from some on the left and saying that their actions are going to lead to Trump's reelection. You know, just shouting fascist, shouting racist, and just cursing and engaging in violence. Surely these aren't good ways forward to prove
Well,
some point.
it's a, even if it's in a mild form, like being rude or disrespectful, or intolerant, it's a form of vigilantism.
Yeah,
And
there might be some case for satire or poking fun, but yeah, it just seems to be so over the top, and like every day it seems to be a new thing. And I'm thinking here, well, I think there are actually some really good arguments that you might have against the president's policy or some things he does, but they're just focusing on these little things like, oh, what's going on with this porn star, or like he wasn't respectful at a certain time, or he was like late for a meeting and that was extremely disrespectful, and he's such a buffoon, and Trump this and that, like just not really getting it here.
well, I think protests in any form, as long as it's peaceful, is an honorable thing to do. But pushing, you know what? So we don't like these people. We're so offended by them. We're gonna be offensive. We're gonna be, we don't like bullies, so we're gonna be a bully.
Yeah, it's only okay when we do it, right? They'll say, well, this person's really lost some, he really doesn't, how to phrase it here, that, well,
Moral high ground.
we're not going to hold him to the same standard as everyone else because, oh, he's so abhorrent that he doesn't really deserve to be treated like we would treat others. He's just so much jumped the shark. But yeah, it's really not the way to go. Another, again, thing, as someone's saying in the chat here, deconverted man, it might backfire in that if you see people acting in such a manner that, yes, it could lead to a re-election. And many people were saying after Trump's election that it was largely a response to not liking some of the things that were going on the left.
Well, there always is a backlash when people become shrill and unreasonable.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't always. I mean, sometimes you have these wave elections where the economy or something is so terrible that no matter what anybody does, one side's going to win over the other. That sort of thing. Let's see. After Trump, then Eric or Ivanka runs, then they win, then the left will just explode. Well, you're setting up a scenario, deconverted man, where we're talking about it. You're talking about a dynasty? Is that what you're saying? No answer from deconverted man.
I see. Yeah. What were some other issues about tolerance that have come across on your end? Maybe some content recently that you've created or some upcoming videos?
No, actually, uh, I'm in the research stage of another video and has nothing to do with that. So when I'm at the live stream offline, yikes.
Oh,
Reconnection successful. All right.
some technical difficulty there.
Yeah, I wonder what's going on here. Anyway, video output low. Now, I just what I'm seeing on a personal level is it was off, then came back on. I'm seeing a lot of echo chambers where groups of people online in on social media, they feel invaded by somebody that thinks differently. They feel that this is like an invasion from the other, and they start an echo chamber of intolerance towards somebody based upon their bio on their homepage or whatever it is, Facebook or whatever, has something that they object to. So therefore, we can never have a meaningful conversation. And then you see an echo chamber of agreement. And I've been seeing that very recently, an example, but I've seen more than that happen recently, where there's an echo chamber going against a particular thought that's goes against what people people think.
I see this in some of the discussion maybe about immigration, and that, well, if you disagree with a certain policy, if you think that immigration should be limited, that people jump to the conclusion, oh, you must hate people from other countries, you're xenophobic, you're racist, this and that, right? It's just not really having the discussion. It's quite that echo chamber there. And that goes into the identity politics issue that, well, if you disagree with a certain policy or a certain group or something, then you must hate that person. To say, no, maybe there are other ideas that people can have. I mean, I don't know what the proper policy is. I don't get much involved in that in politics. I don't know, but it's this seeming overreaction from people that just leading to that. Saying you're being intolerant of these people, and the viewpoints just come out, and yeah, there doesn't seem to be a lot of productive discussion. And I wonder if this is something that's linked to online, as it's just really quick responses, and people are just really distracted by so many things going on at once that they're not willing to have those longer form conversations or delve deeply into the issues, right? Oh, I saw this headline on this website with this certain bent, and I'm just going to follow that and retweet this, share this. And a lot of the clickbait that's out there, and people that are just looking for views rather than maybe having more substantive discussion, talking about the issues, and really having people who disagree put their points forth and explain why.
Do you think that maybe you mentioned, the online social media and stuff? Do you think that maybe we're not seeing anything that we haven't seen before? It's just amplified because of the 24/7 access to everyone else in the world that we have, and the 24/7 news cycle.
That could definitely be the case, and people really can more freely express themselves online, and there's not as much idea for consequence. Like, you see local newspapers, they're just hurling invective in comment sections online and just calling this person, that person names. And they probably wouldn't do that in real life, but because they're behind a computer screen, they're willing to do that more. It's probably just not going to happen in real life. They won't have to face that kind of social backlash or whatever happens to be the case. They're just going to hide behind the screen and just be really nasty towards people.
So the anonymity amplifies the intolerance in some cases.
Right. I think so. And some people are just really set on their own ideas on what a certain perspective or label might be. And personally, I'm not so much a fan of labels. I don't even consider myself a Stoic. I just say these are ideas I have, and I draw inspiration from Stoicism. And I think there are some good ideas within it, and Stoic thinkers, right? But people will have these ideas, oh, because you use this label that you must believe X, Y, or Z. And it's just not really the case. People are more complicated than that. So we could talk about individual issues and what people might think, rather than just, yo, you're on the left, so you must be this. You're on the right, you must be this. You must believe this because you're from this certain area or because you present in a certain way. It's just like really quick thinking that people are doing and not really getting too deeply into it.
Well, one thing that I've been noticing, and I think I know you have, and Deconverted Man certainly has, is that there's certain people like Jordan Peterson or Dave Rubin and others that are immediately being branded as certain, as this or that, without hearing what they have to say. And issues are very complex. And when you have people like Jordan Peterson, he's not going to. He's not going. You don't know where he's going to stand on all the issues, and so he's rejected out of hand.
Right.
I also.
And he doesn't even know. He says a lot of the discussions, he says he's just thinking out loud and he's not quite sure what to think about this. He has like an attitude of humility, and he's even changed his position on some issues over times when faced with some criticism, although he seems to go back and forth. There's that MGTOW issue that keeps coming up, right? People say stuff about, oh, well, Jordan, you're this men's rights activist and, you must hate women. And there was this one discussion where it says, you consider the feminine chaos and your book is an antidote to chaos. So does that mean that your book is an antidote to women? And so the feminine is chaos in society or something. It's like, it was really unfair interpretation.
Well, several months ago, he was an Ear for Men went after him, Paul Elam.
Yeah, for sure. And
for
many
that
people
comment
did.
He made about
pathetic weasels and and he continues to say too that if you've fallen out with women, the problem is you. He keeps saying that. So it's really interesting to see, well, is he really this MGTOW advocate? Is he really like this incel advocate, as people are calling him? I don't think so. It's just simply not the case.
Yeah, and so you get those personalities on the left and the right. You have that's how it was framed. My God, dumb person that has made comment. The
metaphor. Yeah, he doesn't tend to speak so literally about things. He'll use comparisons. He'll use myth. He'll use these archetypes that he talks about, right? But they're just really seeming to throw him under the bus rather than be charitable.
So I like my final judgment on Jimmy Dore. I don't know if you're familiar with Jimmy. D-O-R-E.
Sure.
The person I was talking on the phone earlier is like D-O-O-R, and like, no, they didn't know he was. It's pretty funny, actually. I saw one of his comedy acts recently. But so my judgment about him was out for months, and I finally. So the reason he's so hard to pigeonhole is because you can't pigeonhole him, because he's all over the place. And he's not towing the party line, the progressive party line. He's saying a lot of things that really rub people the wrong way, and then he's extreme left on some things, but then he's things that a lot of Democrats and progressives care about. He's critical of.
Right, very, very critical of Hillary and the Democratic Party, and he was a supporter of Bernie
as an institution, right? And so people like that, they're hard to quantify, and Jordan Peterson's the same way, and there's people become intolerant towards their opinions.
Yeah, and throw everyone in a box because of one behavior. I suppose the loudest people, what's that expression? Like the loudest people get the focus, and then the whole group seems to go downhill. Even I saw an article lamenting YouTube skeptics, and it was saying something about, well, skepticism used to be just a questioning of everything, but it's turned out to be hatred of women and racism. And like, really? Like, why would you say that? I mean, okay, sure, there are some angry people on YouTube, and we could find that in all communities, but is that really the just because of the actions of a few that you're going to say that this whole community or term is really aversive to open discourse and deep discussion? I don't think that's the case. You have people like Michael Shermer out there who's with Skeptic Magazine and many others who have pretty big names and pretty big platforms, and they're doing a pretty good job, in my opinion, in having those difficult discussions.
Yeah, that's just the yeah, that's just painting people into a box, because X, Y, and Z, because these skeptics are horrible misogynists, then therefore all YouTube skeptics are horrible
Hmm.
misogynists, racists, and so, but it's very very tribal thinking, very limited thinking,
Right. And
and
the ease of access to the technology is very, very low. Anyone could just get a webcam or a microphone and just go on and put out content. So the question is going to be, well, what's out there that's worthwhile? What is it that's going to be representative of a perspective? Who are the best thinkers that we can find who might advocate that? As even as I mentioned, the MGTOW community, yeah, there's some people out there who will just be really nasty and engage in what I've talked about on my channel is the red pill rage, where like, well, women are worthless, don't spend any time with them, they're just going to drag you down, like this kind of deal. And then there's just a more refined, shall we say, fairer perspective of men out there who say, well, I just don't think relationships are worth my time. So I'm just going to back away from romantic relationships and focus on other things. And it's not hatred of women, it's not anything like that. It's just saying, well, I just want my life to go in one direction. I don't think marriage is a great idea. I don't think society is really that fair to men who get involved in marriage and have kids, and they're just looking to back away. It's not a position of hatred. It's just perhaps one of pragmatism or looking at the ideas of certain institutions and saying, I don't think this is the life I want to live. Right. So you get the range of really angry to more thoughtful and presenting things in a much different manner that don't come with rage or anger.
right, and with most groups of people or types of people, there's always the range of the people that are doing things that are not polite society, and range to people that are very polite in society,
Hmm.
the full range, but from a very narrow perspective, they're all tarred with the same brushstroke.
Right. And even within feminist circles, well, as someone in chat said, deconverted man, well, there are some crazy ideas out there. And sure, that's true. But there are also people like Ayan Hirsi Ali, Christina Hoff Sommers, many women who are still under that label of feminism, who I agree with on many things they put forth. But unfortunately, a very large number of people are using that label and behaving in some really uncouth ways, just being really nasty towards men and just really nasty in their approach. And yeah, it just has some really bad ideas, that's for sure. It's the excesses of the Me Too movement and just really hopping on the bus and just if a person's accused, then they're automatically guilty. We're not going to give them a fair day. It's just going to be trial by social media. And we've seen many men, even George Takai, right? There was what Aziz Ansari and many others who've just been accused, and the accusations turned out to be false or just not substantiated by any sort of evidence, later even retracted. But we see how much damage these accusations can bring to someone, especially college students being kicked out of their universities even before a police investigation, anything, losing scholarships, and their name is just tarnished. And even if they're later shown to be innocent, they really can't get that reputation back. And the retractions surely won't reach as many people as the initial accusations.
Well, and yes, and when you've lost some period of your life, you'll never get that back. That can never, like the case of college students that are falsely accused,
Mhm.
and they're thrown out of the college, they're thrown off the team, and now they're several years later and they've been cleared. They're no longer 18, 19 years old, in their sophomore year of college. They've moved on. So that kind of derails their entire plans. They might have been, some people plan from the time they're very young for, like, a say on the sports track or some kind of academic track, and when that gets, or public service track, and that gets derailed, then that's it. You can't get that back. Plus, as you mentioned, once you're accused, the stigma can't be erased.
Right.
So you'll never 100% get that back.
Right. So not a great way to go about justice, with just going out there with these accusations and just being very much alive on social media about it, instead of going to the police or having a trial, or just withholding judgment before we have more that comes in. Unfortunately, there are people who will make false accusations, or memory is an issue, right? It's just really unfortunate, especially for people who've really experienced some sort of trauma in their lives. And we see all these people falsely accused, and it's just going to be harder for that person to be believed who's actually been a victim of something.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's a difficult situation because, so we, rather than just saying all this stuff, we understand that that believing someone, or throwing up hurdles and not believing someone that's making an accusation makes it harder for other people to come forward. We understand that, and like, for example, I think that one person with the death penalty, one person, just one single person unjustly dying, an innocent person being executed, is one too many, and it's the same way with being accused. So there's, we had the extreme cases of, oh, so what if a few men, get run over in the, in the current. It's just, that's part of the, the part of the price they pay. And I understand the zeal, because for some people, like with Weinstein, it had, he'd been abusing his position and power for so many years. It's like a comeuppance, but millions of other people haven't been monsters, and millions of other people have never done anything to be accused.
Right.
So
And the Stoics too warn us that the crowds can be very dangerous, that if we just happen to imitate the behaviors around us and just take on certain ideas without really giving it such great thought, it could really be dangerous for us, that we can fall into bad habits, we can fall in with the wrong kinds of people, and we could ourselves be tarnished. And it can be very easy to go into that mob mentality on the internet. Look, all these people are saying this one thing, so it must be true. Well, it's not a good way to go about achieving truth. And it can be very intolerant to just heap abuse on someone when we don't really know the whole story. If we're just so glibly retweeting or sharing an article, it could be very irresponsible to do that.
let's see. Deconverted Man says, see video, feminists lose another trial. TFF episode 85, for example, of men put on trial for nothing.
Is that the Fiamengo files?
Yeah,
Janice
Fiamengo.
Mm-hmm.
I think I just watched that. I'm done for now. Okay, nice having you aboard.
Thanks for
Deconverted
having me.
Man Daniel Green. Please come again.
Thank you. Please come again. And that even came under fire recently too, right? Apu from The Simpsons. And I see more things of cultural appropriation coming about as well, for people wearing certain hairstyles, being appreciative of the culture. But that's still not enough, right? There's no escape.
Yeah, well, so tolerance of the, what did Karl Popper say about tolerance of the intolerant will lead to the well, to put it shortly, there will be no more tolerance. It will lead to no tolerance. So that's kind of the vicious cycle of tolerance, intolerance. If the people that are intolerant we're tolerant of those who are intolerant, they will win, and since they are intolerant, they will not be tolerant of us. And that's not a left-right issue. That's anyone who's intolerant and in control of whatever it is.
Hmm. Right. The boot can always go on the other shoe, as I said earlier. Yep. And some of these, there was even a piece in Reason recently where there was a Title IX complaint that a guy thought that he was going to be accused, so he went to college administrator and filed a
Right.
Title IX complaint against the person he thought was going to accuse him. And then she ended up getting in trouble, even though there was no good reason to think that anything happened. He filed the complaint just so that he can avoid being the victim of
A
an allegation.
preemptive complaint, right?
Yeah, so that's quite the backfire and the excess there.
Is it? Do you think it's getting to the point? I know we have the extreme, like the third wave feminists. We have the SJWs. Um, we have, like you said, the red pill anger MGTOWs. Is that what you called them?
Oh, well, some indeed.
Some, yeah.
It's a phrase called the red pill rage, where some
Rage.
people
Okay.
are just really, really angry, and
Right.
they're
Some
just
some MRAs are really angry and do untoward things. Most are out for rights for men, and so we can't tar any one group. Um,
right. So we're hoping that people can get out of that state of rage and again look for more productive ways to deal with the things that they disagree with. As Jordan Peterson says, yes, there's a lot of suffering in life, but how are we to best deal with it? And from the Stoics, we say, well, we're just going to view that obstacle as a challenge, and how can we overcome that? How can we make the best of the situation and prevail amidst adversity? How can we better ourselves? How can we better the world and not just be resentful all the time? And you get people like Elliot Rodger, you get people like this recent incel phenomena running into people with vans and some murdering, right? As their values, their priorities happen to be so twisted that they find, oh, well, having a romantic relationship or having sex is the most important thing. And since I can't have that, then I'm going to kill others. I'm going to kill myself. That life must be meaningless. And that's just a really bad state to be in. So that's one example of anger really manifesting to the extreme, leading to loss of one's own life. Right. So it's looking for a way to get out of that and to work toward more acceptance, have more gratitude, and really seek to get ourselves in order before trying to light the world on fire or saying that life is pointless, and just really checking out in that way.
do you think that there's, along with this intellectual dark web, that there's this wave of quote unquote centrists that are breaking through? And we see, I don't know if Dave Rubin's a good example or Joe Rogan. Who would be a good example of that?
Well, I think that there is some hope in that. Joe Rogan is really, really popular. He's reaching out to many mainstream audiences,
Very
people,
popular.
yeah, people who aren't necessarily interested in politics or philosophy or psychology, but rather he's bringing on all these guests and talking about all these topics, more of
So you
like an
think he's a good
everyman.
example then?
Yeah, that he's not an academic. He's not like many others in the dark web, right? He's coming from a comedy background, some fighting, announcing there, reaching out to so many different audiences. And I think that's a great thing to have these conversations. Rubin gets some criticism that he is too buddy-buddy with people on the right, that he's had so many on his show. Are there many people from the left? Although he says, well, I'd like to have them on my show, but they just won't come on. As some people are, I think, coming to an unfair conclusion that he's some closet conservative, or he's funded by people on the right exclusively or majorly. I mean, maybe that's the case for Patreon. I don't know. But he's definitely been critical of the left and critical of the right in many cases, too. As you mentioned, Peterson gets labeled as this alt-right leader, but he's been very critical of the alt-right. He's been very critical of the excesses on the right and the left.
Well, I mean, that the whole branding thing is I mean, we have, for example, not so center, but could be center is Carl Benjamin Sargon of Akkad, who is doing battle with the alt right
Hmm.
cannot stand the white nationalist. He doesn't
Right.
like identity politics of any stripe, and yet he's labeled alt right, labeled a white nationalist, and he's opposed to that.
Right. And even Ben Shapiro was listed as one of the people getting the most hate from the alt-right. A lot of anti-Semitic language, as I think it was the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, said that he was one of the biggest recipients. There were just people making some really over-the-top remarks to him and talking about gas chambers and final solution and all of this, and just really being really nasty toward him and his wife and his kid. And it's like, well, yeah, he comes from the right, but he's also part of that dark web. And he was even
Yeah,
saying in a recent conversation with, I believe it was Sam Harris, I would have never imagined us sitting at the same table and having this discussion and finding such common ground. But modern times have put us in this place where we've seen such intolerance on the left. We've seen just so much craziness in the current year, right? So
well,
they were
people
they were
like Ben Shapiro. I mean, that was a good point. I disagree with him on just about everything, and yet,
yeah, it's
um,
like economics, like the abortion issue, and some of his language surrounding trans individuals. Yeah, like, but I'm not going to say, oh, he's this and that, and I'm not going to
yeah,
hear him at all. I think he has
well,
good points in some issues,
he's
and that he's off the
he,
mark on others. Yeah.
yes. I mean, he's not. And but the thing is, what I'm finding more and more is that there's a lot of voices out there that I think are progressive, are left, are liberal, but because they're associated with this intellectual dark web, they're all fascist and so
Hmm.
forth. And Ben Shapiro is certainly more conservative and certainly religious.
Right.
And one thing I have to say is that when you listen to, I'm just amazed when I hear Ben Shapiro, I hear Jordan Peterson, and some of these other, Eric Weinstein, and just the list goes on and on. Sam Harris, and these are great minds, and the reaction on the left is, oh, they're stupid. I don't know. I'm not going to listen to that stupid. Or
Yeah.
did
And
you
the
read any,
wine
did you
the
read any of their
Weinsteins.
books? Like
Yeah, the Weinsteins have particularly identified as left. Was it Evergreen is quite a left-leaning campus as well,
right.
and it's just
Yeah. So I mean, but they're stupid because they're not towing the party line. They're not, like Noam Chomsky's hated on the left and the right because he's not towing any party line,
Mhm.
and he's highly critical of people on the left because he doesn't want to bother with he thinks people on the right it's just low hanging fruit, so he goes after people on the left, and so that rankles everybody. So he's hated on both sides because he's really about as far left as you can get on many topics. But he's despised on both sides, and if you happen to be supportive of the state of Israel just as a state to exist, then you're a horrible person right there. You're
Mhm.
branded right there, and then um, that's gives you the right to be intolerant towards that person because they're a Zionist pig dog.
Yeah, so a lot of quick judgment here, and yeah, it's just not the perspective to go talk about the issues individually, try to get to the heart of the matter, take some more time and be more charitable of individuals
I'm
before just.
finding, I'm finding that I mentioned this before on a live stream that my Twitter feed for this channel, I literally, um, there's several about a few hundred people follow me, and I follow about 300 people, so it's not a big either way. But I literally have to click on people's. A lot of times I have to click on their profile to see where they're coming from because I have the viewpoints are from every possible direction, as opposed to it's not my Twitter feed is not one big echo chamber. It's not reflecting all the left or all the right or all the feminists or whatever. It's a sprinkling of just about everybody. And when you see that, when you look at all these opinions, it makes you. I've had discussions with the converted man in the last couple of days about a specific hot button issue, and it's like, every time I hear another perspective on it, I have to think about it, on, very touchy subject. And
Hmm.
that's because, I didn't think of it that way. And so I think that's kind of, seeing so many diverse viewpoints on my timeline, and I get mad. I see some people say stuff I get mad at, other stuff I agree with, other ones I'm scratching my head. I have no idea what their point of view is, but there's so many of this on the same subject. You'll see completely, for anti-Brexit. I'll get like posts in a row that are alternating for and against Brexit in the UK, and for and against abortion rights, the trans issue, um, you know, and so it kind of forces you to see that um, that there's a lot of valid points of view, and like you mentioned with the, we're secular, but we don't discount religious people just because they're religious people. We can discount something they say, like, yeah, Noah's Ark was real or something. Maybe we can critique that. Well, how big was it? But we're not going to put them down just because they're religious.
Right. And I think that's a big benefit of many channels, say like Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson, and that they're having all sorts of guests on their show having these conversations, and even people from the left and the right coming together, like Sam Harris, Ben Shapiro, I've mentioned. Yeah, you could take some time to listen to these conversations, better understand their perspectives, and hopefully be able to better refine your views and get a better idea of where people are coming from, rather than just thinking everyone who disagrees with you is malicious, they're arguing from poor intent. It's just not the way to go. Sometimes it's going to be the case, right? It could be hard to tell the difference if someone is just being really nasty on Twitter. Or are we going to put them into that troll category so quickly? Maybe in some cases.
Well, we had the recently the Jordan Peterson talk with Matt Dillahunty,
Hmm.
and I cringed through half of that,
Yeah, I thought Jordan was really off the mark in many
and
things.
and the thing is, well, here's it was like first I was cringing, and then I was like, you know what, he's got the balls to get up there, and because I mean, you go up against Matt Dillahunty, that's like, running headfirst into a razor blade. That's he's sharp. He is sharp, and he knows his stuff. But he Jordan Peterson wasn't afraid to do that, to face with, he had his conviction, his ideas, things that he believed in, and he learned. I think he walked away learning something from it. I think he
Right.
got a perspective out of it, and I think he's talked about it since. So
Mhm.
um,
Right. And he's even mentioned many atheists in his audience as well. And that, well, he's talking about these Bible lectures, but then people have tuned in and he's learned something from them. So hopefully there'll be some learning. And again, when there was some MGTOW criticism, hopefully he'll move away from his perspective as well of men being weasels or failures. And he says he's apologized and he understands about how men have faced some really nasty things in family courts, and he cast the family courts and law as being extremely unfair to men, but yet he's going back on the record again saying that it's men's fault if they haven't been able to secure relationships, and to blame women is not the way. But it seems even still to be a mischaracterization. It's not necessarily blaming women. Again, it's saying, okay, well, maybe it's just not worth it. Maybe the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Maybe I want to focus on other things besides romantic relationships. And many men can say this, even gay men can say and craft these arguments about, well, I just don't want a relationship as well. Women can craft these arguments, right? It's not specifically focused on one group. I mean, MGTOW might talk about particular female characteristics, things that happen to be more common in female populations. But yeah, he's still seeming to get it wrong there. It would be nice if he would engage with someone like Karen Strawn, one of the bigger voices, and of course even a woman in
right.
our community.
Well, you
But
know
we
what?
have,
He's getting around the globe. I'm sure he'll get. I'm. There isn't a day or a week where he doesn't have an hour to talk with somebody somewhere.
mhm,
So we'll probably get around. That's the one thing. You talk to that many minds and go to that many places, meet people halfway.
right.
And for us, while it's a learning experience for him, but we get to experience two different points of views, sometimes opposing, and it helps us in our striving for or search to be tolerant of other
Right.
people, to respect others. And I kind of put tolerance and respect as two different things, but I understand tolerating people who you disagree with, and I think
Right.
it's a fine enterprise.
Right. And one guest I had on my podcast was from the MGTOW perspective, Sunrise Hoodie, a YouTube content creator. And I thought that conversation went really well, talking with him about some parallels and differences between MGTOW and Stoicism. And it seemed that he had quite the reasonable perspective. There were many critics of the podcast, and they were talking about things that were never even said in the podcast and bringing up, oh, there's all this hate and blah, blah, blah. Like, well, was there any in this podcast? I don't know what you're talking about. Did you listen to the podcast? I refuse to listen to the podcast. One of the comments was saying, well, okay, well, I don't think we're really going to have a conversation here if you're refusing to even listen to what's going on. And they're straw manning a lot of what's being said. And this, oh, there must be this hatred. There must be this deep loneliness, or there must be something wrong with you. Like all these shaming lines, and not even engaging with what was being said in many cases. So again, there was the backfire there in that if people are going to post these kind of criticisms, then the men in that community, like they're not going to have more incentive to try to get into a relationship with these women who are commenting, or women in general. If you're just going to heap abuse at them, it's just not going to happen, right? Try to understand better where they're coming from, and not just straw man them, not attack them. It's not the way forward.
And so you're, I believe I have the link to your Stoic Solutions podcast in the description.
Yep. Stoic Solutions podcast.com. You could find everything there. Yep.
Right. And I think I linked the YouTube channel. I'm not sure.
That's right. I see that there as well.
Yeah. So I highly recommend anyone listening to this, if you haven't already done so, check out the Stoic Solutions podcast. And it's a Stoicism is really, it's timeless. It's like any great philosophy or way of thinking or way of living, and you can keep learning, and if you want to grow and expand your horizons in your life and your happiness, then learning is the way to go. And that's one place to go, is Stoic Solutions. I got paid for that.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I even had musicians from the band Cellar Darling on recently, so we talked about Stoicism and music, and that was quite a pleasure to have them on, as they're very popular bands touring across Europe, Japan, many other countries. And you listened as well, hearing about the hurdy-gurdy, an instrument that you don't hear about that much.
I think you posted a video where they had the hurdy-gurdy. I saw that.
Yeah, they covered the Prophet song by Queen.
So I love the hurdy-gurdy. Well, so thank you for being on Disturbing Trends again, and a topic that will certainly will be talked about for a long time to come.
Very good. Yep, the hurdy-gurdy will endure. Yes.
I'm talking about tolerance, and that will be, that's going to be.
That was my joke. Hopefully, you could tolerate it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, anything with drone strings, I like. So hurdy-gurdy's great. So,
all right, very good. And yes, I'll in touch.
Okay, I'm going to stop the stream. Oh, thank you for being here.